Hey there, it's Clint again, and I'm going to revisit ZSSH today. So in the front here, you'll see I have the ZSSH cheat sheet, and in the back, you'll see I have SSH to an Amazon instance. This URL I'll put in the video description so that you don't have to copy it. And what we're going to do is we're going to make our ZSSH service, two identities, and then our configs and policies to authorize those identities. So let's get started. Here we go. We're going to make the service name, client identity, service server identity, and the port number. Let's just set in some variables. Now we're going to create those two identities. Bam, bam, two identities created. I'm going to skip this delete step because we don't need to delete anything yet. I'm going to make a host v1 config. Host v1 config is going to use a protocol of TCP, an address of local host because I only want to send SSH traffic to my local machine. Port of port 22, which is the port up there, but it does also specify these listen options with bind using edge identity equals true. That's important because that's going to tell the ZD Edge tunnel when it turns on that it should bind using its identity name. And we'll see that in operation in a second. You can see that an intercept config is not necessary, so I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my service. But since I've skipped the service creation or the config creation for the intercept, I'm going to only use the host v1 configs as part of my service. Now I need to authorize those services. I'm going to allow any endpoint. There's a server endpoints, which you can see is what I set up here, server endpoints. They're going to be able to bind the service or host the service. Let's go ahead and do that. Then any endpoint with a dial is going to be able to dial, and those are going to be our client endpoints. And that's it. Now we have set up our entire network so that we can ZSSH. Next thing we've got to do is on this Amazon machine, we have to download the ZD Edge tunnel for Linux. In this case, it's AMD, so I will wget that file. You can see I have run this before, and I forgot to delete the zip file. But that's all right. We'll unzip it, and then we'll say yes to the file. So now we have a ZD Edge tunnel. Now I can run ZD Edge tunnel. If we look, we should have a ZSSH server.jwt file. Let's enroll that using ZD Edge tunnel. So just give it the same name, ZSSH service server.json. And now we have done almost everything that we need. The next thing I've got to do is I've got to you'll notice down at the bottom here, I have a Windows command shell. And at the top is my bash shell. I use Windows subsystem for Linux. If I cd to the ZSSH folder, I can now scp from cd AWS the ZSSH service client.jwt to my local machine. And now that it's on my local machine, I can go back to AWS. In AWS, what I can do next is I can start the ZD Edge tunnel. So it's ZD Edge tunnel. We're going to use run host mode so that sudo is not necessary, and so that this process does not intercept or attempt to intercept any DNS requests. We're going to run host. We're going to give it an I of ZSSH service server.json, and then I do believe that's all we need, right? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we see we are connected to an edge router. Fantastic. I have run the quick start on this machine, so this edge router is public. Now we're going to, yeah, I've downloaded this. Now we're going to download the ZSSH for Windows. So let's copy that. Let's see if ZSSH is here. It is. Let's do a wget on this. And now you see ZSSH Windows is local. It has this function called Enroll. So I can actually, let's make sure I can execute this. For some reason, when you use wget, in Windows from Cygwin, you have to make it executable. I don't know why that is. If you just download it normally, you don't have to do that. There it goes. So you can see there is an enroll function. So let's run enroll, and we'll enroll the ZSSH service client. Did I not? Let me rm ZSSH service client.jwt.json. Let's do this again. Maybe, oh, that's why. It's a JWT, not a JSON file. Let's do that again. There we go. Now we're enrolling our identity locally. Excellent. So you can see before we have started our ZDEdge tunnel on the top. And now what we're going to do is run ZSSH. I'm going to use the service that's named ZSSH service. I'm going to use the config file that is ZSSH service client.json. I'm going to give it my public or private key, which is what my SSH is going to connect with. That's my credentials, which is at this location. And then I'm going to connect in as Ubuntu and this is where the neat addressable terminator comes in, ZSSH service server. So I'm going to connect to the identity name, not the host name. When I do that, you'll see on the top an incoming connection from or to ZSSH service from ZSSH service client has occurred. And down at the bottom, you'll see that we have a connection to the edge router has been logged. It did not find, in Windows, it did not find the OpenSSH agent, which it looks for. So it just tells you, you know, the OpenSSH agent wasn't found. And then it sources the file because it's part of the bash rc, which if I cat.bash rc, you'll see at the very end down here, I source this right here. And so that emits that message that you just saw. But we can prove that we're here because if we do a psef for grep for ZDEdge tunnel, we will see ZDEdge tunnel is running. And if I were to kill this process, you can see I have exited my SSH shell. This up here has been terminated and is no longer running. And we've proven that we were SSHing or ZSSHing to this machine from my Windows box. Very neat stuff.